Hello and welcome to this presentation about sensor data as a method of data collection. The intended audience for this is students in Units 1 and 2 VCE Computing, which I am a teacher of. So let's have a look. Our learning intention is that students can identify data that can be collected from sensors and issues related to this method. So there are ethical and legal issues, and there are also advantages and disadvantages. So we're going to start off with the question of what are some sensors that we already know about? Now, I have been teaching robotics for the better part of 10 years, actually 10 years, and even I was surprised when I looked up what the list of commonly used sensors were. There are quite a lot, so I'd be interested to know how many you could name. So, when we're talking about getting information from sensors, we're talking about getting information automatically through devices, sensors embedded in devices, systems and environments, and we can detect properties such as the temperature, the movement, light, as in movement of people and things for that matter, light, sound, the location, and user interactions. So just, how often you're pressing to the button to cross an intersection is a very simple version of that, and how you interact with your own devices. The Internet of Things, which is basically all of these devices that can connect to the internet and interact with it. So this is things like garage door openers, it's like your house thermostat, it's like all the smart appliances in people's homes that people seem to get so cranky about on social media. All of these things are collecting data and potentially transmitting it. In fact, probably transmitting it. So what type of sensors do we have? Well, we have environmental sensors, which might be able to sense the greyhound here, including temperature, humidity, air quality, light levels, noise, motion sensors, accelerometers, that's how your phone knows when you're tipping and turning it, gyroscopes know what kind of direction you're going in, GPS and movement tracking. And we have biometric sensors, fingerprint scanners, heart rate monitors, facial recognition, iris sensors, much loved in Hollywood movies. We have proximity sensors. There's one of those called a passive infrared sensor that you can see in lots of classrooms. It's like a little white dome. Input sensors, touchscreens, microphones, cameras, infrastructure, traffic, water flow, electricity consumption. I can see my electricity consumption anywhere I am on the app because of this sort of thing. So, when it comes to the advantages, I was going to edit down this list, but there's just so much on it. It can provide continuous and real-time data without human intervention. If not actually real-time, then pretty close to real-time. Like you might have a 15 or 30-minute delay, but in the history of data, that is incredibly quick. It eliminates human error and bias in measurement and recording. There's my greyhound again. You can't see her, but she's here. It captures data at scales and frequencies impossible for manual collection. So you can have like minute by minute collection, which would just have been far too labour intensive to have somebody sitting there recording the temperature or the electricity usage minute by minute. It enables monitoring of remote and hazardous locations, so you can put sensors in places where it just wouldn't be safe for a person to be, so that then you can only send people into those locations when you have to. And it produces objective and quantifiable measurements. So, you would hope, and this isn't always true, but you would hope that a sensor reading from one day can be accurately matched with a sensor reading from another day. We'll come to that in the disadvantages section. And it allows automatic responses or automated responses. So you can say, when the wind is high, then we'll put down these shade sails. A school that I taught at, although this wasn't well implemented, but they were getting information from weather sensors outside of the school and then opening and closing the louvers on the windows to let a breeze through when the sensor data told them that would be a good thing. And there's no reason why that couldn't work, it just didn't in that situation. And it's cost effective, like it's actually pretty cheap. A lot of these sensors that we've been seeing in here cost $1 or $2. Some of them cost as much as $15. They're pretty cheap. Even the sensors that you have in your car and so forth are a surprisingly small amount of the cost of that car. They're mass produced and cheap. And it captures data that humans can't easily observe or measure. So you or I might not be able to accurately comment on the humidity or, the infrared and so forth, but a sensor can do that very accurately. Now, there are downsides, of course. You do have to invent in hardware and infrastructure. As I said, the hardware is actually pretty cheap these days, but you've got to have a way for it to report it back, so it's going over a wireless network or a physical network. You've got to provide power to it. Often the cost of the sensor is actually the smallest part of this equation. Our sensors can malfunction and produce inaccurate and misleading data. So, they can go wrong, and also sometimes weather conditions can affect them. They generate enormous amounts of data depending on how they're configured, and so you can need a lot of storage and capacity. There's this whole area of study called big data, and there are huge data sets out there that tax the ability of even the most powerful computers. There's the dog again, moving the green screen, so that's probably a little bit weird behind me. Again, taxing the capacity of even the most robust computer systems. Privacy concerns are a real issue. I'm just going to adjust that image because it's annoying me. Okay, Trixie and I are back. It raises privacy concerns, and very real privacy concerns, particularly with location tracking and biometric data. We'll come to that in a minute, but these are not trivial concerns. And it may lack the context that a human observer would naturally include. So yes, it's objective, but it also is very specific. And environmental conditions can affect sensor accuracy and reliability. They can get dust on them. The heat can affect how they age and so forth. They are not just set and forget forever. So, one of the big things which I'd be remiss in not talking about is just how big sensors are in terms of medical technology. A lot of us wear smartwatches that can measure all sorts of biometric data. Some of them can even do your blood sugar, apparently. You've got these little machines. I've got one of these where you prick your finger and it does an analysis with a sensor on your blood to see what your blood sugars are, and then it connects it back to your phone, so the data's going places. These doovers here sit on your skin, and they've got a sensor in them, and they do the same as one of those guys there, but continuously, because I only check my bloods about once a day. And you have these devices that will get information from a pacemaker in your chest and pick it up from there and hand it off to your medical provider so that you can be remotely monitored in terms of the performance of your heart. So, what are privacy and ethical concerns? So first up, what legislation should you understand when collecting information using sensors? So if you're in class, I'd be hoping that you're referring to the Privacy Act of 1988, and in particular the APIs. There are probably specific APIs that relate to this. And what is one ethical problem you can imagine, I've written image, but imagine with collecting information with a sensor? I think that some of this, I say benign, but it's not really very benign. You could be tracking how often employees are sitting at their desks, how often their eyes are on the screen. There's lots of ways you can take away people's autonomy. And you know what, in the sort of scale of things, employers are often pretty happy to take away people's autonomy, or at least people at the lower levels of organisations. And you have issues with people tracking each other for coercive control and so forth. You can have one member of a relationship literally tracking all the movements of somebody else, not only where they go and the car tracking it, but conceivably, what their heart rate was during the day, which you can imagine how that situation probably is right now being used in really harmful ways. So there are significant privacy and ethical concerns. Let's wrap up with looking at 6 true or false questions. Sensors can operate continuously without human intervention, providing real-time and consistent data. Yeah, well, that's for the most part true. It's more true than false. Sensors are always the more cost-effective way than manual data collection methods. Well, no, it isn't. If you just wanted to know how many cars were driving past your house and it was a nice quiet street, you can just sit out there for an hour, and that's going to be more efficient than setting up a sensor and all of the nonsense that goes with that. You could just have a pen and paper and get that information. Sensors aren't always more cost-effective, particularly in terms of time. A significant ethical concern is that is the invasion of privacy. Yes, I'd say that's a huge concern. That's true. Sensor data is automatically accurate and requires no calibration or validation, making it more reliable than data collected through other methods. Not always. So no, it still requires validation, it still requires calibration, and it still should be viewed with a degree of skepticism. Malfunction or calibration drift means that collected data may become unreliable or inaccurate over time. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And finally, an ethical advantage of using sensors is that they can reduce human bias in data collection by providing objective measures based on the physical phenomena. That's more true than false. Certainly, there is room for error, but much less so than you would have if a person was collecting it. So, that's the end of that presentation, and I hope that that's been useful.